Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and I wanted to complete the Battle of Fredericksburg. Last year, I animated the battle where Stonewall Jackson took on John Reynolds' corps on the Confederate right, the Union left. So in this video, I will be discussing Marye's Heights. On the Union left, the troops there were supposed to have launched the main attack against the Confederate line, but a series of miscommunications had resulted in half-hearted assaults against the position held by Stonewall Jackson. Nevertheless, the Blue troops had broken the famed Confederates' line, but could not follow up on the breakthrough. On the Union right, where attacks were to be made against James Longstreet's line on Marye's Heights, but be more of a distraction as the main thrust was on the left, Edwin Sumner's troops would launch assault after assault against the well-fortified rebels located on the heights. Although Longstreet's corps spread out across 4 hills, the main thrust by Union forces came at Marye's Heights, occupied by Thomas R. Cobb's Georgians and supported by 30 pieces of artillery. Lying in front of the Union troops once they marched out of the town was a mill race, which forced the Blue troops to cross at the designated bridges or boards thrown across the waterway. To add to the Federal soldiers' misery, Confederate skirmishers had pulled up many of the planks across the bridges, forcing the Federals to cross on the stringers. This situation made them easy targets for the Confederate artillery perched on the hill in front of them. Parts of Nathan Kimball's and John Andrews' brigades began to cross the bridges across the mill race. The 8th and 4th Ohio and the 1st Delaware came under Confederate long-range artillery fire with shells bursting over their heads, wounding many of their comrades. Once across, they formed into battle lines and awaited the reinforcements promised to them, but as their officers looked around, they could see no support, and to stand still was to court death. So the commander of the 8th Ohio moved out first, followed by the other 2 regiments toward the hill. One Union soldier stated, "As soon as we rose over the little bank, the missiles came in upon us spitefully, and the air was full of exploding shells." French's men were to pull down any fences or impediments as they moved forward, to allow the support units an uninhibited advance. Once the Blue troops came within rifle fire, the Georgians let loose a destructive fire on the 1st Delaware and the 4th Ohio. The 8th Ohio was protected to a certain degree because they were taking cover behind some houses and a blacksmith shop on the Union right. Behind them began to form the rest of Kimball's brigade, the 7th Virginia, 24th New Jersey, 28th New Jersey, and the 14th Indiana. All of those units came under artillery fire once they came into view of the rebel guns. They filed across the mill race regiment by regiment, then formed into battle line for the attack against Cobb's men. The Ohioans and men from Delaware had to pull back to the swale in the middle of the field, where the rebel bullets could not reach them. But this also meant that retreating came with a deadly consequence, so they were stuck there. The rest of Kimball's brigade advanced to the swale, but even though he ordered a bayonet charge as he was carried from the field after being wounded in the thigh, the men did not go past where the rest of the brigade remained. Some of the brigade did venture closer to the stone wall, but it was impossible to hold out against so many projectiles flying through the air. Cobb became concerned that his men were burning through ammunition too quickly and sent word to General Robert Ransom about his concern. The North Carolinian, instead of sending ammunition, sent in part of John R. Cook's brigade. Although the Union troops were pinned down, they still delivered volleys from their prone position, enough to make a dent in the North Carolinians until they made it to the safety of the stone wall. A New Jersey soldier wrote, "Every soldier after firing his piece had thrown himself flat upon the ground to avoid the enemy's bullets, and I did not see how I could possibly load and fire by laying down in that crouching column of men. To stand up boldly was almost certain death. So continuous was the roar of musketry on the firing line, that I do not remember hearing the reports of cannons, but the frightful whiz of heavy missiles passing over our heads every few seconds indicated that the batteries were not silent." Behind Kimball's men came the brigades of John Andrews and Oliver Palmer. Oliver Otis Howard, commander of another division in the 2nd Corps, was happy to see the 132nd Pennsylvania leave. Some of its members had stolen his breakfast that morning. Andrews' men advanced across the open fields towards the impregnable rebel position. There was a rush, a cheer, a crash of musketry, with a tempest of bullets driven straight at their breasts, and the line dissolved. Palmer's brigade charged behind Andrews' men, but likewise got thrown back. The swale flooded with Blue troops, regiments became entangled, and officers lost track of their men. Many began to risk their lives and retreat back across those open fields to get away from the constant musketry fired at them by Cobb's men. Cobb himself would be wounded about this time, the projectile hitting a main artery in his leg. He would be carried from the field and bleed out. Zook's brigade of Hancock's division of the 2nd Corps formed on the west side of the mill race. Behind them was the Irish brigade. Zook moved his men out, but the center began to fall behind and the flanks advanced further. His men made it to within rifle range of the Confederates, but the well-protected rebels destroyed Zook's line. The 53rd Pennsylvania did tough it out on the right, however. The Irish brigade formed up across the mill race, many of the regiments forsaking the bridge because it was taking too long to cross, and officers told their men to plunge into the frigid water and make it to the other side. They too approached the stone wall, but got cut down. The 69th New York, with 2 companies detached, went into battle with 168 soldiers. Only 27 returned unharmed. They also fell back, and Caldwell's men formed up to tackle the Confederate line. The 64th and 61st New York had not made it across the mill race before Hancock rode up to Caldwell and ordered his men to attack because the Irish brigade was suffering dearly. The brigade moved forward. They collided with Cobb's men. As they exchanged volleys, the 145th Pennsylvania began to falter, but Caldwell rode up to them and rallied the beleaguered troops, and they returned to the front. It did not take long before the Confederate volleys wore on the blue ranks, and Caldwell was forced to pull his men back to the swale. The 64th and 61st New York was ordered by Hancock to extend the line to the right to protect the prone soldiers in the swale. By this point, 2 divisions had ventured across the open fields and yielded no significant result in their attacks upon the Confederate line. And now, another division of the 2nd Corps under Oliver Otis Howard now made their way to the front lines.